Hey everybody, welcome back to Author Eke. Today we have Gary Quesenberry, and he's got a pretty good book here we're going to talk about. Talk about his writing style, what kind of the motivation around his writing. Marketing is really key to everybody in books and everything. So Gary, take it away, introduce yourself to the Author Eke crowd.
My name's Gary Quesenberry. I'm Army veteran. I got out of the Army in 1991. Yeah. Well, we're a military family, so I was Army. My son's Army. He's a drill sergeant down in Fort Jackson, South Carolina right now. Yeah, I got a daughter in the Air Force and a daughter who was a linguist and cryptologist who just got out of the Navy after 6 years. So
Similar background.
Yeah. So after 9/11, I started working as a federal air marshal, and I did that job until 2020. And I retired and moved back home to a small town of Hillsville in Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, and I've just been here writing ever since.
Excellent. So I'm a Air Force brat.
Okay.
My son was in the Army. He was a geospatial imagery intelligence analyst, so he did a lot of drone stuff.
Okay.
He works now for two of the intelligence communities in Washington. So we go out and visit him all the time. He lives in Manassas.
Okay. Yeah, our kids live because our daughters both live in the same house,
Oh, wow, okay.
One, her husband works at the, in that area.
Yeah.
My other daughter, she works down at, now I'm spacing on the name of the post, just way up there.
Fort Myers, Fort Meade.
Belvoir. Is it Belvoir?
Belvoir, yeah. Oh, yeah, by the Army Museum.
Yeah. So we just came back up from up there last weekend. We were up visiting, as a matter of fact.
We're going on the 17th. We're going to go to the 17th, and I'm going to try to stop by Arlington again to the tomb. Do that again. So exciting. What did you do in the Army? Were you a military police or something, or how'd you get involved in the Sky Marshal?
I was field artillery. So
I was a scout.
What's that?
I was a scout, so we love bringing you guys out with us to call artillery.
There you go. Yeah. I was field artillery. I was over in Desert Storm. I was 7th Infantry Division out in Fort Worth, California, before they shut that down with Bravo 15 Field Artillery. And during Desert Storm, they sent me over with the 24th Infantry Division. And I was with them during Desert Storm. I got out shortly after Desert Storm and came back home. Just kind of messed around here in Virginia for a year or two, trying to find my, try to reintegrate myself, into civilian life. Yeah. And I ended up going back out to California, getting married to the girl that I was dating when I was in the Army out there. And
oh, wow.
And now we live here.
That was a beautiful post. Fort Ord. I mean, if you want to get stationed somewhere, come on, get stationed Fort Ord.
I mean, you can see the ocean from my barracks.
I know. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It was rough. Like it was it was a rough lifestyle. 7th ID, and the light fighters and all that stuff, being out in the field pretty much the majority of the year, sleeping outside. But, you get to your barracks room, crack open a cold beer at the end of a long field problem, looking out at the bay there in Monterey. It's kind of,
man, you think you're at the Halakoa.
Absolutely. Yeah. I used to see Clint Eastwood all the time. He'd come on post, and golf with the post general and everything. He was the mayor of Carmel, back then.
Oh yeah. That's, they were the first, the 25th were really the first light infantry divisions until the 10th Mountain came back.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
The 7th is back, actually.
Really?
I didn't realize this until I went down and saw my son graduate from school, the drill sergeant school down there at Fort Jackson. And there was a couple guys with 7th ID patches on. And I asked my son about it. He said, yeah, they're back.
I wonder where they're stationed.
I forget where he told me. Well, I don't know.
Interesting. All right. So talk about your book. Let's see your book.
So my first book came out on April the 1st, Homecoming. It's the first book in a trilogy, and it's pretty exciting. But like I said, the first was the publication date. So it's out now, but we're not having the big book release party until this Saturday, which will be April the 5th down in Mount Airy, North Carolina.
Nice.
Local bookstore there, support a local business and stuff like that. But it's pretty exciting. I'm really pleased with the reception that it's getting so far and what everybody thinks about it. So.
Yeah, I think these small indie bookstores, you get a kind of a different crowd because they're looking for something that's not particularly mainstream or what they're being fed to read.
Exactly.
So they're getting different perspectives on a lot of stuff. I love Barnes & Noble. They've been very supportive of me. But, the indie bookstores, I'm moving to Arkansas later on in the fall. And I'm thinking about opening an indie bookstore.
Yeah. There you go.
I know enough authors that would stop by,
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm retired now, so I just focus on writing, but I often think about things, like that. Like if I was going to do something, could I open up?
Well, I'm a lot older.
Right here on Main Street, Hillsville or whatever, but
I'm a lot older. I can think about that stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm retired. I mean, I'm
Oh,
55.
me too. I've retired 3 times.
No, no kidding. I just
I
did
haven't
one.
got it right yet. I mean, I did from the Army. I retired in '95. And then from a couple of technology firms I worked for, that went IPO, and
Yeah.
it was a good run. And now I'm a bus monitor on a school bus for the special education, special needs folks, part time, do
Nice.
something. But I think I'm gonna probably fully retire. I say that, but I probably won't when I move up there, because I just like to work. I write when I can, but
Yeah.
yeah, I just kind of I kind of enjoy the writing aspect. So, what got you into writing? I mean, that's totally. Did you have nothing to do on the airplane because it was kind of?
Sorta. It's kind of that way. But I actually have 4 books out already that are nonfiction.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I got my start in writing. So, as a federal air marshal, I worked for a period of time at our National Training Academy in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I was a lead firearms instructor for the Federal Air Marshal Service for a period of time. I had a little bit of notoriety going on because I was on a television show on the History Channel, Top Shot and Top Shot All Stars. I did that, and people wanted me to come out and teach. So I would travel around and teach quite a bit, firearms courses. And anytime I was teaching, I would always talk about, because people ask you the question, like, what gun should I carry? If I want to defend myself, what's the best way to go about doing that? Should I take jujitsu classes or get my CCW? And I would always tell them the same thing, that, you can't fight what you don't see coming. So the first, building block in your personal defense program should always be situational awareness.
Yes, head on a swivel.
Exactly. So I wrote a book, based on the things I learned in the military, just life experiences. I spent several years working in a prison, so you learn a lot about situational awareness in an environment like that. And then on to the Federal Air Marshal Service, and I put all that into a book called Spotting Danger Before It Spots You. And then that spun off into a series of books about situational awareness. And that all started when I was on the plane, just putting together one of these firearms courses, and it started out as bullet points, on a piece of paper. And the more I looked at those bullet points, the more I realized that started looking like a table of contents. And as I'd be on a flight with my notebook, and I'd kind of flesh those bullet points out a little bit. And eventually I had a manuscript. So,
wow.
Those 4 books are doing really well. They've won some awards. Sales are still really strong because it's kind of an evergreen topic. People are always going to want to understand.
Oh my God, yes. Look what happened in Frisco, Texas, just the other day. A kid gets stabbed in the heart at a track meet. And I mean, I've got 2 daughters and a son, and I've always told them, I said, when you're walking around, do not put your hands in your pockets. You don't want to be the sheep, right?
Right.
Head on a swivel, look around, be cognizant of where you're at, because people or predators look for people that are not situationally aware.
Oh, absolutely.
That's who they take advantage of. So hands out of your pocket, know where you're at, head on a swivel, look where you're going, and look, but keep vigilant.
Absolutely.
And I do that. I mean, I sit in a restaurant. I sit where I can see the door. I mean, I don't know if that's just Army stuff. I look at people, right?
Right.
I was a scout in the Army. I'm pretty good at identifying some things, especially if they're, Russian or East German. I can spot them.
Yeah. Well, that's how it all started, just putting that course together and getting those books out in the world. And then once I retired, it was, I'm from the Appalachian Mountains, Carroll County, Virginia, right in the Blue Ridge, right between
beautiful
West
country
and North Carolina. What's that?
Beautiful country.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it here. I grew up here. I left when I was 17. I didn't come back.
Me too.
So
I left at 17, came back. I quit high school, joined the Army, and then went back after I retired for about a year, then left, and now we're moving back after 30 years.
Yeah. And it's a transition, and that's kind of what a lot of my book Homecoming is about. Being from this area where I'm from, we've got a reputation of being good storytellers here in the mountains,
Oh yeah.
And my grandfather was an amazing storyteller. Everybody's always told me I was a good storyteller, and my wife was always saying, "You should."
People say I'm a bullshitter.
Bullshit. Well,
you just said it nice.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, my grandpa used to say, "Never let the truth stand in the way of a good story."
That's right.
So, you're telling a story, you can't let the truth get in the way. So I felt like fiction writing, was something that I could kind of tap into my creativity a little bit and tell one of those good stories that I always wanted to tell. And, it's called Homecoming for a reason, because it's about a guy named Case Younger who, he was an Army veteran, did a few combat deployments with the Rangers, decided he wanted to get out of that and do something a little quieter. Something that kept him in the service of his country, but didn't draw too much attention to himself. So he became a federal air marshal, and everything was going the way he wanted it to, until one day, a flight was hijacked from Athens to Philadelphia, and he kind of got thrust into the media spotlight for stopping that hijacking. And he lost a partner on that flight. So it was kind of hard for him to process and deal with. And he decided he was just going to hang it up and go back home. But, he's been gone for 20 years and there's a lot of disconnect there between his family and his friends, his loved ones. And he's got to kind of rebuild those relationships. But as he's doing that, some things go really bad there in the town. And he's, he takes care of it. And a lot of bad things happen to bad people. But it's a pretty riveting story, but at its heart, it's a story about coming home. It's a story about family and relationships.
Excellent. And there's 3 of them. There's going to be 3 of them.
There's going to be 3 of them. Yeah. This one came out April the 1st. Now, my publisher, YMAA Publications, they put the screws to me when it came to releasing book 2. And they wanted it to come out like very quickly because that first book kind of leaves you on a little bit of a cliffhanger. Nothing crazy where you're going to be upset by it. But,
right.
It ties the story up, but it leaves you wondering what happens next. And that second book in the series, covers that period, and it comes out August the 5th. So you've only got 4 months to wait.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, exactly. So between the first book coming out and the second book, there's only 4 months, between release dates.
Yeah, that's
the third and final book in the series. I say final, but there's room, for it to progress if I wanted it to. But that one will come out April the 1st, 2026. So all 3 of them will be out within 1 year of each other.
That is a fast pace.
It is.
That is fast paced.
Yeah, it wore me out. I spent a lot of time up here in this office.
My wife, I'll start writing. She's like, "Are you part of the family? I mean, are you going to participate?"
Right. Yeah. Can we see you at dinner once in a while?
Yeah. Well, I like to write in the morning. I like to work out in the morning, especially in the summertime when I'm not working. And then if it's nice, Texas, it's usually nice in the summer, and sit outside and write, listen to some country western music or something, and that gets really the kind of the flow going of my creative juices. But I'm always thinking about something, about how the book or a book, or I don't know how many books I've started that I haven't completed because I just get to a point and I'm like, it was a good exercise in writing, right, in the thought process, but I don't know if I'm going to take it further. And I'm working on another World War I historical fiction right now.
Nice.
I think that's really got me interested in. I thought about, so I was in the 1st Infantry, 2nd or 3rd Infantry Division, and 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And I'm thinking all 3 of those were in World War I. So why can't I write a book, historical fiction about each one of those units or somebody in each one of those units? So I've done one of 4, the 1st Infantry, 1st Expeditionary Force. Nobody really knows because I never gave the unit other than the 1st Expeditionary, and those kind of branched off.
Yeah.
And then this is going to be about a 3rd Infantry Division soldier.
No, well, good luck
Battle
with
of
it.
Marne, second.
Some of my favorite books. Some of my favorite books, and I've got them everywhere in this room here. But some of my favorite books are historical fiction. The one that really, really got me hooked on historical fiction was Stephen Pressfield's book Gates of Fire.
Yes.
About the 300 Spartans, at Thermopylae. I've known that story, for a long time. I'm a big history buff, but reading that perspective of it and, his take on it, it's fictionalized, but very historically accurate. I've read that book probably 20 times.
Yeah, that's what you really got to do in historical fiction because people come at you.
Even though, I can imagine.
You can't. When I was writing the book, I had the BAR in a month, and I looked. Then I said, I need to do some research on the BAR just to make sure. I go, oh no, I need to move it. I put it too early in the year.
Yeah.
Because people that it wasn't then. So I moved it around. But yeah, I love doing the research. What I'll do when I'm writing, I'll write something down. I go, oh, let me research this because I want to put some truth into it. So I'll research that right then.
Yeah,
and add some things, and I kind of like do that. So do you have like a set schedule when you write? Do you have a word count or a thought process, or what? Are you I'm a pantser, right? So I just write, or do you outline? Do you meticulous like a friend of mine? He is just meticulous at character building.
Right. Well, for me, I don't know. I really didn't know where to start.
Yeah.
Because I was new to fiction. I'd written 4 nonfiction books, and that's very clinical. There's a lot of research. You got to do all the citations and make sure that you have, everybody credited where they're supposed to be credited and doing it in the proper format. So this was a lot of fun. I didn't know what to do. So I started, I subscribed to like Writer's Digest and started listening to all these podcasts where they interview different writers. Some of my favorites, Jack Carr, Mark Graney, Brad Taylor, guys like that. And I listened to Stephen Pressfield, listen to those guys, how they do it. And then I tried different things in the beginning. I knew the first thing I did when I started thinking about the story, I kind of had a rough idea of what I wanted the story I wanted to tell. And I needed some characters. So my main character, Case Younger, I came up with his name and kind of had this image of what he was like in my head. And from there, I knew where I wanted him to start in the story, and I knew where I wanted him to end. So I kind of approached the whole thing like a land navigation course, I'm sure you're familiar with
Oh
those.
yeah, your
But
waypoints, your intermediate.
yeah, I had a start and I had an end point, and I needed those waypoints in the middle to get me from the beginning to the end. And they were just little bullet points in between, like the direction that I wanted the story to take. And I stuck with those as closely as I could. But at a certain point, and you've probably experienced this too, in writing, your characters kind of take on a life of their own.
Oh yeah.
At a certain point, and they kind of start dictating based on their characteristics, their traits and habits as what direction that story might take. So I realized those bullet points I put on paper, that was me thinking through how I would handle this, but not necessarily what Case Younger would do. So I kind of had to weave around some of those bullet points and make it more, about my characters' wants and needs than what I wanted and needed. And I was just there to put the whole thing down on paper. So it was kind of, I know the word surreal gets thrown out there a lot, but, it's kind of a surreal process to realize, because I hear authors talking about that all the time. Their characters taking on a life of their own and the characters dictating the story. And I always thought of that as, just kind of, I don't know. I'm in charge here.
You can.
I'm telling the story, but it's really not the way it worked.
Right.
There are characters that have different traits and different circumstances, and you'll be writing something that you had in your head that you thought this is the way it should go, but then you realize that character would never do that. Then you have to start thinking about, well, how would Case Younger do it? Or, somebody else in the book, Travis Campbell or his grandpa Dempsey, any of these guys that I list in the book, and it changed the story a bit. But I think at the end, once I get to that end point, and even the ending changed a little bit, but I think as far as plotting and pantsing goes, I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I do for the historical fiction. I put bullet points of things I want to talk about, things I want to introduce. It just depends on where I introduce them. And when I wrote 1 of 4, I had to make sure that the character had no attributes.
Okay.
I mean, there is none. People say, who is he? I go, I don't know. I mean, only God knows who the unknown soldier is.
Right.
Think about it. So that was hard to do because I want the reader to say, okay, it could be this. This is the type of person I think it could be, or the type of soldier that it could be. So I really wanted to kind of do that. But a lot of people say, well, who are the characters based on real people? I go, well, a lot of times they're based on an amalgamation of real people.
Exactly.
That you meet. Not just one particular, but there's a lot of different personalities in the characters.
And that's the question I get a lot, because people read, the book and they read, about Case Younger, the protagonist, and they're like, wait, he was an Army veteran, he was an air marshal, he lives in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. Is this you? I'm like, no, I was just writing about things I knew,
Yes.
I was never a ranger. I was field artillery, so that's different. And, our career paths were very different, me and my main character. And then the town that he ends up in Virginia, it's very much my hometown. However, I fictionalized it.
Right.
Because I changed the name of the town and the county just so it wasn't so specific, because I know people will read that and be like, wait a minute, that's not there.
Exactly.
That wasn't there.
Oh, yeah.
This time. So making it a fictional place, I can do what I want to with it. It can have elements of, my hometown, but it can also have elements of other places that I've lived throughout my career and life. And I kind of do the same thing with my characters. They're, like you said, they're an amalgamation. There's character traits and things that are a little bit of me, maybe here and there, but for the most part, it's just people that I've ran into that, I've admired or loathed, in some cases. Oh, yeah. And I put those character traits in the book.
Yep. I like that. And then how the characters change over time. They'll get better at something, or they'll mess up at something, or they'll change mentally. Based on the circumstances that they're had in the book.
Yeah. So I think all the best characters go through that change, the change in their perspective. If they don't, they're not growing as a character, in my opinion.
Right.
And I wanted my main character, I wanted Case Younger. He's not perfect. He's not this super spy, that you read about in a lot of thriller novels that, he just can't be beat and everybody whispers his name, in dark corners and things like that. No, he's just a man. He's got a lot of problems. He's got anger issues. He, kind of walked out on his family when he was young because he couldn't control his temper and had a blow up with his father. Kind of walked out on his little brother. There's all these mistakes that he's made. And as he goes along in the story and he's confronting, these problems that he runs into in his hometown, he makes mistakes there too, mistakes that have a very devastating effect on some people. And he's got to work through that. Once you get in the middle of it, there's no just backing out of it. You have to work through it. You got to work the problem. You got to get to the end. And that's what I wanted my character to be, somebody that, through his own mistakes, he's growing and learning and trying to reestablish these relationships that he walked out on so long ago. But he's got to do it in a way that keeps him from getting hurt. And that's a delicate act.
It's fun building those characters, right? Because or environments or they call them worlds, right? You build your world of your character. It can be based on something. Somebody could say, "Oh, it's a historic. It's a fictional town in Virginia, the Smoky Mountains, small town population, whatever." They could be taking a trip up the Smoky Mountains. They come up on a town that resembles it, and they're going, "Huh, could this be that place?" Right, or it has a soda shop on the corner, or a drugstore,
the diner.
So for you young folks, a soda shop was where you went in and you could get a drink at a counter, like a bar, but it just had Cokes and Cherry Cokes. That's a soda thing. So
we used to have one on Main Street up here. As a matter of fact, it was a knuckle drugstore, and they had a soda fountain, in the drugstore, and you could go in. And I live 20 minutes away from Mount Airy, North Carolina, which is the town Andy Griffith grew up in, and that's Mayberry.
Cool.
So that town is Mayberry. So when you go to Main Street, Mount Airy, you've got Walker's soda fountain. You've got the courthouse and the police station and those old police cars that cruise around and stuff. So, it's very much
pretty neat.
The television show. So when people go down there, and there's I've even had my hair cut at Floyd's barbershop. So, that's right down the road. So, he was
a brave soul letting him cut his hair. He was a brave soul, Andrew Griffith, letting Floyd cut his hair.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I trust that old fellow. No, and Floyd was a real guy. He was a real guy right down the road here. So it's kind of, to me, it was kind of satisfying to be able to put some of those elements in my book. And in book 3, there's quite a big scene that takes place in Mayberry, Mount Airy, North Carolina. And just putting things in there about my hometown. The people that are from here, they're going to recognize, even though it's fictionalized, they're going to recognize certain things. They'll recognize the courthouse. If they've been here long enough, they'll remember Ben Franklin's Five and Dime on Main Street. There's a little scene that takes place there, a mention of it.
Yeah.
So just sprinkling those little elements of reality into a fictionalized story, I think brings readers closer to the story if they can.
Of course. I think you can have outlandish, places, but I think it's more from a fantasy type, not a thriller, right? You want it to be grounded in something that you think, okay, this could actually happen or has happened.
Yeah. Exactly.
I just released my first thriller on this
Congratulations.
Thank you. And second edition, I took the rights back from a publisher and redid it. People ask me, is that real? I mean, holy cow, that's real. I go, well, it could be. It's fiction, and good fiction is real.
Yeah.
When you think about it. But yeah, so it's fun. So what do you do from a marketing aspect? So you're going to do your book launch in an indie bookstore, which I think is awesome. Yeah. Where else have you thought about marketing other, podcasts and things like that?
Well, my publisher, it's not one of the big 5. You know what I mean? They're a small publisher, but they're fantastic to work with. And, what a lot of people don't realize is being an author is a whole lot more than just sitting down, writing a book and sending your manuscript off. And thinking that's, just going to take off. That's not how it works. They've got other books. They've got a market that they've got to take care of. They got to edit. They got to proofread. They got all this other stuff going on with other authors. So, if it's your book, it's your baby, you got to take care of it. So you got to get it out in the world the best way you know how.
You've got to. I look at it as a business, right?
Absolutely. Yes, very much.
Each book is a business because you market each book differently to different audiences. After you gain some not notoriety, but people, 1 or 2 people know you.
Yeah, you get a little name recognition.
Yeah, that kind of helps. But yeah, I tell people, spend an hour a day marketing.
Yeah.
Get out. And how long do you market a book? Well, 104's been out almost a year, and I market it all the time. And I'll continue to market it. And it's actually getting more publicity now, almost a year later. So I'm thinking about what am I do for the 1-year anniversary? I'm thinking I'm going to really do something cool for it. But, you can put your book in for awards and things like that, which help.
Yeah.
But it's really just, there's no magic pill. There's no magic wand.
Trust me,
you've got to just go out there and beat the streets. I mean, it's a knuckle dragger, right? I mean, you go out there and you low crawl every day.
Yeah.
So hopefully pop your head up every once in a while
Yeah.
See a terrain. You know, it's like when you talked about land navigation. You know, people say, well, okay, what happens in land navigation if you come across a body of water? And where you got to go is on the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
You shoot a 90-degree azimuth and you walk that 90-degree azimuth until you come to a point where you can cross that water obstacle. You shoot another reverse 90-degree angle and you walk there and then continue.
Yeah.
And you always fix your sights on something that is not movable. If I'm going to put something, I don't want to put, like, I'm going to move to this and it's a car, the car moves. I want to put to that old oak tree that's been there for 100 years. So I know it's not going anywhere. I'm going to go to that, and then I'm going to shoot another azimuth, right? Yeah. That's how you navigate the
and marketing is kind of the same way.
Book.
You know, when it comes to marketing, you don't want to. I try not to do anything trendy. You know, so I want to stick with those immovable things that have been around forever. I wanted a solid website. You know, so Author Bytes built my website for me. They do fantastic work.
Who?
It's called Author Bytes, Bytes.
Okay.
And, you know, they build an amazing website, you know, and that was kind of my hub. So that's where I started everything. It's got links to the book trailer, to all my social media, all the nonfiction stuff that I wrote. And then from there, you know, just social media platforms. I'm not, you know, like crazy big on social media, but I try to stay active in terms of promoting the books on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You know, I do that. I've got an email list. You know, I send out newsletters to the people who subscribe.
I have yet to do that. I got emails out the yin yang.
Yeah.
I don't. What am I going to? What am I going to write about I could probably write one a month. You know,
well, I do maybe one a quarter. Like I don't even do.
That I could do.
I personally hate it whenever I sign up for something, you know, you buy something online and you forget to uncheck that box where you get their newsletter and you're getting something every day, you know, and that just makes you want to unsubscribe. So if there's something, you know, like I'll put another one out, you know, when I start marketing book 2, and I don't, you know, flood people's inboxes with stuff about the book.
I did that. I worked in sales for, you know, 20 some years. I didn't do email campaigns.
Right.
But I mean, I do a weekly, what I call book and a beer.
There you go.
So about a minute and a half long, I'll get a book and I'll pair it with a beer.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about the book and I'll talk about the beer.
There you go.
And so far, people are kind of enjoying that because you know, like I did one. It was on a ship that sunk off the coast of South America. Yeah. So I got a pirate beer. You know.
Okay. Yeah.
But I've never spent $14 on a bottle of beer, nor shall I again.
That's good marketing, you know.
Yeah, but it is because it gets my name out.
Yeah.
And something other. What I have found out is people don't always like to hear about your book when you talk. Talk about something else.
Yeah.
You have subliminal messaging, right? When I'm doing stuff, I may have my book in the background, or I'll have, or you know, something, but I'm not talking about it.
Right.
But people can see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
ad placement.
There's my nonfiction back there.
See, there you go.
But that's it.
Yeah, but that's what you got to do, right? When you're watching a podcast or somebody on TV and they're sitting in front of books, you're always going like, "What's that book?"
Yeah, you want to know who's the master at that is Jack Carr. Like he does his podcast and everything in front of this big bookshelf, and I'm always scrutinizing that bookshelf. You know, trying to see.
I had him on the podcast.
I know we got a lot of similar titles and stuff laying around. So.
When he did the Targeted Beirut, I had him and the co-author on the podcast. We talked about that.
Yeah,
it's a good book.
I haven't read that one yet, but
that's a very good book.
I'm so busy with the writing, I haven't had time to read what I want to. But
I know. I got books stacked up. I need to read or anything. I might have to have yours on a book and a beer.
There you go.
I like to promote veterans. Kind of a passion of mine because I know
it's tight knit community. That's good.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I don't know about you, but I have found some of the most creative people in the world in the Army. I've seen some of the most talented artists. People can draw like there's no tomorrow, or
play an instrument,
poets, or singing. It's just a musical talent. It's just amazing. And half these people are in combat arms.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's there's I don't know. It's a very diverse group of people.
Well, yeah.
And you're going to have people from all walks of life and all levels of skill. And
I had a 30-man scout platoon, and I don't think anybody was from the same place.
Right.
You know, and you gotta. I think that's what the military teaches you. I was an E7 when I got out, so I was, the platoon sergeant. But how to build a cohesive unit in individuals,
sure,
and act as one. But then the beauty of the American Army is you can act as a unit, but if you have to, you think independently.
Yeah.
That's the key.
I think that, like you said, that's why we're so successful.
That's why, because I was a Cold War guy, right? So. Russia, everybody, that's why they were terrible in Ukraine. I mean, they do a road march on a road all lined up. I mean, that's just insane. I mean, why would you do that? They're not independent thinkers.
Yeah.
Where the American soldiers, sometimes to his detriment, are independent thinkers.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Sometimes we can be a little too independent.
Yeah, sometimes. They just, shake the shit out of them or something.
Right.
No big deal. But so, what do you do in your spare time? What do you like doing?
Well, I hunt. So, I've got 23 acres here that butts right up against my brother's farm. He's got about 80 some acres.
Nice.
We've got cattle. And up until about 20 minutes ago, right before we started this podcast, they were all out here just bawling, all the cows, because they've all had calves over the winter. And the calves are at the age where they start kind of running off and doing their own thing. So the mothers are out in the field mooing, like crazy. And I was like, oh my God, I hope this stops before they talk.
That would have been the best sound effects.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But I like to hunt, and fish. I'm very much an outdoors guy. We got some chickens, we got some cattle, and I actually took up last year. I took up building my own bows. So I build long bows and stuff as well.
Wow,
that's a fun hobby, and I've built some really nice ones. I sold a couple, and I just do it for fun, do it for myself, but that's my goal this year, is to go out hunting and bag something with a bow that I made myself.
Do you know where Lexington is? Kentucky?
Lexington, Kentucky? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we were visiting my son, so we stopped there, went to Kroger, grabbed something. And I fell in love with that town. I mean, I was like, I would love to move here, but then we decided to move back to Arkansas with the grandkids and kids and stuff. Beautiful. I'm like, Then I went to, old Alexandria, I like to buy one of these houses. Then I go and I look at my royalty check and I go, I don't think
maybe not Alexandria.
Not right now. I bought a toy Corvette from my last ones. I mean, a real toy, not a.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, it's like for me, I wanted to do something to celebrate the release of my book on April the 1st. So I went out and I bought myself a new pocket knife.
Nice.
Yeah, because that's where I got the name for my character, Case Younger. I carry a Case pocket knife, and when I first started coming up with the the character list and the names and stuff like that for everybody, I was going back and forth on last names for my main character, and I wanted to be something kind of like an outlaw vibe, but I didn't want to do James, like Jesse James.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about the Dalton gang, but my sister-in-law, her last name's Dalton. They got a little boy named Dalton, and it's just a lot of Dalton. So I ended up settling on Younger. And, it's got a bit of a rebellious vibe to it. And then I had to come up with a first name. And I was going back and forth on all these different names. And one day I was outside and I pulled my pocket knife out for something. And there it was, on the handle there. It just said Case. And I got to thinking about Case Younger. And it just sounded right. It stuck. So when I started writing, it was Case Younger. And it just, it just felt right. So that's how he got his name.
The NCO that chose the soldier, the one out of the 4 to go in the Tube of the Unknown Soldier, his last name was Younger.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
From Chicago. Yeah.
Okay.
Sergeant Younger.
All right.
Sure enough.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, that's how my guy got his name, my pocket knife.
Cool. I just kind of throw him out there and hope I don't hurt nobody, hurt anybody's feelings.
Yeah.
Do that stuff. But yeah, well, great. It was great talking to you, Gary, and I wish you the best. Again, veterans out there, if you got a book or anything, let's schedule you on the podcast. We really want to promote you guys, pals, all around, because there's a tremendous amount of talent out in the current ex-military and whoever to get your word out. Some of you guys have some fantastic stories that just need to be able to get a platform to talk about.
Absolutely. You're doing a good thing getting them out there, so we appreciate it.
Yeah. I meet people all the time, and the bond, right? When I got out of the Army, and I went into the corporate world, and I got into pre-sales engineering. I was a technical side of the sales process of Microsoft and Symantec and Altiris and some other places. But there's always somebody in that group who I was meeting with that's ex-military, whether they were Navy, Army, it doesn't matter. And you always build a bond with those people, and that's where you start building that the trust, because there's a camaraderie there.
Well, absolutely. And that's the one thing that I miss, since I retired, is that camaraderie that you get, whether you're working in the military, law enforcement, just that, you gotta have each other's back.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I appreciate what you're doing, because you're still out there, you got veterans' backs, you're looking out for guys, helping promote people and get their stories and stuff out there. So thank you.
Yep. That's hey, 1%ers. And not the bad 1%ers.
Right.
Less than 1%. Whatever,
What's
maybe.
that?
Well, Gary, let's show the copy of that book again. Let's see it.
Yeah, so this is it right here. Homecoming, book 1 in the Case Younger series. If anybody's looking to pick up a copy, or you want to just learn more about it, you can go to my website, which is GaryQuessenberry.com. Quesenberry. I know that's a mouthful.
Quesenberry. Okay.
It's just my name, GaryQuessenberry.com. And that's the hub for everything. You can learn about the book. So you can watch the book trailer. You can read the synopsis, find a little bit out about me. There's some cool little, tabs and stuff on there to make the site a little more interactive. And then links to all my social media. So, if, you get a chance, pick a copy up. And if anybody does read it and they, feel like they're up to it, just leave a review, because those reviews really go a long way in raising, awareness of the book and getting word out, that this is something out there that everybody's really enjoying.
Yes. And what's your publisher's name again?
My publisher is YMAA Publications.
Okay.
So, and they, they were my publishers for all 4 of the nonfiction books, and
all right.
they're going to be the publisher for the first 3 books in the Case Younger series.
Excellent. Well, Gary, thank you for your service, number one, and thanks for putting the making people aware of keep your head on a swivel, because don't be a sheep, because there's predators out there and they're vicious.
They're always hunting.
They're always hunting. And then you always need to be, you don't have to be the fastest, you just can't be the slowest, right? We're talking about gazelles.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Great.
Best of luck.
Thank you. Best of luck, and wish you the most success.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.